Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Gordon.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today. We have author Gordon Frisbie, author of Farm Pond, as well as 2 other books. And Gordon, I'm super excited to learn all about this book. It says a fairy tale. Can you dive into that more and maybe how this book was inspired?
Yeah, fairy tale is a misnomer, but I thought a fantasy book called Farm Pond would fall in with books about agricultural impoundments. And I didn't want that to happen. So I added fairy tale to it, even though there aren't any fairies in the book.
Well, you don't need fairies for fairy tales,
No,
right?
I did address that somewhat with a hardcover version where I added a fairy to the front flap. So that, because the fairies weren't happy about it either. So I had to add a fairy to the front flap, and so there's a fairy in the book now. But the tale came about from a series of text messages I was sending a friend to keep her entertained, and these text messages, they lasted almost, they were in the draft form for about a third of the book. There were several, probably like 10 or 12 separate text messages. And sometimes I cheated and I'd write them out on a text editor and then paste them into my text messaging because they're getting so long and complicated. But about a third of the book got covered at that point. And then she deleted them. So at that point, I created a document, regular Word document where and it started to look like a story. And not long after that, she passed away. So I had no choice but to continue the story. And she became Eve. Well, she was Eve all along. She got a kick out of that. She was Eve, and Peacemaker, her dog, becomes one of the main characters, and her cat just tagged along to do what cats do, is just lay around and do nothing. And that's what her cat does. And the cat became Gruffy. And Gruffy's always there in the book, but he never seems to do anything. So he's just a character in the book. And then I'm Malcolm in a sense. I put myself in the book. I'm actually I'm in the book several ways, but that's how the book came about. But I really didn't have a story at that point. It was just silly, just stringing these events along. Comes a journey through this world called In Between Land, where Malcolm and Eve and Phantom and Gruffy end up in Between Land, which is like Earth. It has a blue sky and clouds and mountains and valleys and it looks like a regular planet, except it has all fantasy stuff and all make-believe stuff in it. And it has 2 sons, has twin sons, because that's required, I guess, when you write a fantasy or science fiction. You have to put twin sons in it. And that was kind of a fun element too, because when you think about it, that really changes, the seasons and everything like that. So that became an interesting part of the book. And you always have to remember use the plural suns, suns rise, suns, so it is. I threw in things that were made to confuse me, I think. But that's part of writing a fantasy, I guess, is you're making stuff up, but you got to keep a tight rein on it or it starts getting out of control, which it was happening. And I created a bunch of other characters just to help Malcolm and Eve get through this place. And also Peacemaker more or less takes charge when he gets there because he senses something's going on and something more important that needs to be accomplished while he's in between land. While Malcolm and Eve, they just want to get back to Earth. They didn't want to be there at all, but they were there, and it was because of a unicorn that the whole thing starts with a unicorn and a creature called an avapod, and they're visiting Earth, but then the whole thing falls apart when Eve discovers a rock that isn't really a rock, it's an avapod. She takes it home, and then the unicorn comes over to her home to find the avapod, and then everything goes crazy, and they end up in in-between land. It's fantasy, so you just make stuff up like that, right? So that's what I did, and I put everyone in in-between land. But Malcolm and Eve weren't happy with that at all. They didn't want to be in in-between land, and they wanted to be back on Earth where they could do their own business and stuff. But they're in between land, and so they're stuck there, and they never really become major characters. But they keep the story centered all the time. They're always there until the story gets into more complex things where we need to get more critters and creatures involved in the story. But they're not a big. The main character is Peacemaker, and then a little later in the book, another dog comes in the book, which is based on a dog I had a few years ago, and she's actually the dog that Boo Boo, who I wrote Echoes in the Stars about. But I had to bring her back for this book, and so she becomes a main character too. But obviously, she's an angel now.
Okay.
The folks up in Yeffin, which is like heaven, send her to in-between land to help with all the commotion that's going on down there. So she and Peacemaker really are the main characters. And I think, but there's a lot of other characters in between land that help them out. There's the wee ones, which are like gnomes. They live underground, like the gnomes we have around here. We never see them, but they're underground and taking care of things, and they're pretty helpful. And there's a wee one named Merlwee, who's a shaman. He doesn't do magic, but he's really smart, like a doctor or engineer. He's pretty smart. So he becomes probably the primary. Yeah, he's the primary wee one, but other wee ones are involved. And then there's another Earthling called C-Dub, who's been in in-between land for many, many years, just because he proved that he's really accomplished at defeating evil. So they more or less brought him back to Wee World so that he could keep tabs on things. And so there's I could keep going and going and going and going and going and give away the story, but that's kind of where the story gets going without being a travelogue. I have to throw in intrigue and evil and all that other stuff too. It gets in there. And so a lot of things that need to be saved and defeated and resolved.
So is Peacemaker trying to get back to Earth too, or is his main
he knows he has business there. He's
okay. So he's looking at more of the challenges of the in-between land and what he needs to accomplish there.
Yeah. And the wee ones in C-Dub, and well, there's Sasquatches too, and there's witches and Sasquatches, but they find an old book that kind of describes this end, and it's called it's a time of reckoning. It's called the Yearing, and it happens about every 1,000 years or so on in between land, and it just happens that Malcolm, Eve, and Peacemaker end up in between land just as the Yearing is coming about. Like there's mysterious forces that are drawing everything together, and so they realize, oh, this is probably a Yearing, and they find a book that describes a Yearing, and actually there's a big black animal involved. They don't know if it's a dog or what, but they know there's a big black animal. So it's kind of steers the story towards, oh, this is Peacemaker's job, to save the world from this time of reckoning. And also Phantom gets involved in that, and everyone gets involved. And sure enough, evil shows up And it's pretty bad because the evil wants to enslave not only in between land, but the whole continuum. I mean, that's a continuum. If a universe contains innumerous worlds, the continuum includes innumerous universes. Am I saying that right? Innumerable.
That makes
That's
sense.
the big word I was looking for, innumerable. So, but the evil wants to take over everything, and that's their job. And there's little devices so they can travel between worlds and between universes and stuff. And that's what all the evil characters are trying to do. So yeah, there again, I'm telling the whole story again, and I want people to read the book. So I don't know how much of the story I should tell, because I think it's a lot better in the book than the way I'm telling it right now.
Well, I think we have the gist. Is this an adult book? Is it for adults or is it more for children age?
I think it's middle age.
Okay.
It's a middle-aged book. There's nothing really adult in there. There's some adult beverages and that kind of thing. I think it would, the audience, I think, would be middle age on up.
Okay.
To be honest, I think I think some of the humor and references, I mean, would be mainly for adults, older people like me, because there's some dated. I have a lot of dated references in there, that I think people my age would only understand. And I do that on purpose because I'm not a young guy, and all the things I relate to are older things, like the 60s and 70s and whatever. So I think the older people will get that, but I think it wouldn't. Younger people might say, well, what is that? I don't get that reference. I don't think that would matter to them, though. I think the story would just keep moving along, just blow by it.
Well, and they'd learn more, right? They
Yeah,
can look it up and get the context.
they might, yeah, become more hip, knowing some of these old things. Yeah, and there's humor, but the same thing. I think they could just blow by the humor, and because it is subtle, it's very subtle in places. I think you can just blow by that and still enjoy the book. So I try to make it for as wide an audience as possible.
Well, they say write what you know, right? So, and if it's fun for you, then keep going with that.
Yeah. Well, it's and write what I know. I went through the book so many times. Sometimes it'd bore me, and I like, oh, I have to entertain myself here, so I'll add something silly in there. So it's writing what entertains me, and hopefully what entertains me will entertain other people as well.
Right. And so do all these creatures, or I shouldn't say creatures, characters talk to each other like out loud? Are they talking to each other out loud or through their mind?
That's a great question. Because this book, I think I'd say it's inspired. It's inspired might be the wrong word, but Madeline L'Engle's book, A Wrinkle in Time. Are you familiar with that? You must be familiar with that. Everyone's familiar with that book. There's a device called kithing. It's telekinesis, and that's how dogs can talk to the humans. Or that's a great device. I think in A Wrinkle in Time, it's used in a deeper sense where people could actually get into other people's minds. But in my book, I just use it so different creatures, because there are different creatures that have to talk to each other, and kithing becomes a great device. So yeah, whenever you see italics in the book, that's where characters are kithing back and forth. I also used another other device called tessering, which is wrinkling in time, instantaneously move from one space to another. I use that for the Sasquatches because we all know that Sasquatches just disappear instantaneously. And I finally figured out what they're doing is they're tessering. So the Sasquatches are tessering all the time. So I use that device as well. But yeah, because there's a lot of dialogue in there. I've never written so much dialogue in my life. This is the first time I've included this much dialogue in the book, and it's dialogue is wonderful because you can use vernacular. You don't have to worry about grammar. And so I I abuse dialogue a lot because it's almost comforting to just go back to vernacular, but you have to be careful with that, but um even my editor was correcting some of my vernacular. Like, no, I go back, like we have this thing with further and farther, and I use further all the time, but further and farther are used two different ways. And sometimes I'll use them the wrong way in dialogue just to make her mad.
I'm sure she'd be happy to know that. Well, yeah, because I mean, dialogue is a great way to like define a character, right? And define their personality and their kind of their aura and who they are. And so, and also like being able to picture all the characters in your head based on that dialogue.
Oh, exactly. It's perfect for developing a character instead of having to describe a character, what they are, what they're like, what they do. I don't do much of that. My characters, there's a little physical description in there, but I keep it at a minimum, and I let the dialogue and the interaction take care of who the characters are, because I want them to have character. I want them all to be individuals, and have their own eccentricities. That's a tough word for me to say, but yeah, for them to be eccentric. Um, and that's the fun part, I think, and to figure out how they talk and interact with other characters. You actually kind of get attached to them. It's weird, they're little made up characters that, oh, I kind of like this guy, So it's a funny thing.
Yeah, I'm always very attached to my characters, whether I'm reading or writing them. So yeah. And I'm glad you told me why I've never seen a Sasquatch. I've been hiking so many years in the Colorado mountains that I would have thought that I would have seen one by now, but I still haven't. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, all the videos I get, they're always fuzzy and they're probably staged anyway. Because but they're great characters. I had fun with the Sasquatches in my book. They're kind of, it's funny because names, how do you name things? And so that became a little game I added to the book too. Where do these names come from? Where are the names going to come from? And I had all kinds of weird things. Because actually some names that came from strange Midwest cities because they sound like science fiction names. But the Sasquatches, they all had normal names. That's how you see a normal name in the text. It's like, oh, that's probably a Sasquatch.
Interesting. A human normal name, right?
Yeah. So I gave them all normal because everyone else, I was just making up so weird names. Well, the wee ones have normal names too, but to identify them, I always put the word "we" after their name. So Merle becomes Merle Wee, and so that way you'll know it's a wee one when you just see the name without saying, "Oh, the wee one." It's a shortcut to identifying wee ones. I always add "we" to their name. But when they talk to each other, they just use the first part, Merle or Crux or whoever, whatever wee one is involved in the story at that point.
Oh, that's a good idea. And I had never thought of using something, a tool like that for my characters.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little device that, because there's a lot of wee ones, and I didn't want to have people confusing them with other characters, so I just added "we" to the end of all their names, and that way there's a lot of them.
And it sounds like this is more like I'm getting epic fantasy feels to this. And
that's the whole point. Yeah.
Would you say, okay, I wouldn't make sure I wasn't wrong.
In itself, it's probably not epic fantasy, but that is the goal. That's what I'm shooting for. It's those are my favorite books. Like Wrinkle in Time. The Earth Le Guin stories, the Earth Sea trilogy. Are you familiar with that? And of course, C.S. Lewis, the Narnia stories, those are epic. I probably stole a lot from that because I enjoy those books. I enjoy the old classic fantasies a lot, and that's really what I base this on. there's even a little Star Trek in there, I think.
So I did see in your bio that you won an award from the Colorado Independent Publishing Association. Was that for Farm Pond or was that for a different
that was no, that was Echoes in the Stars. Yeah, in the pets and animals category.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about Echoes in the Stars then.
Okay, well okay. Yeah, that was an emotional project because it was a memoir
Okay.
about my adventures with dogs, specifically my Australian Shepherd, Boo Boo, who was an incredible character. It also spilled over to other dogs that my parents had, but I was always taking care of them, taking them for walks and stuff. And that was a series of Shiba Inus. So basically, stories about Australian Shepherd and Shiba Inus and all the crazy things we did. That started when I wanted to write a book. I've read the books previously, like I said, but I still don't know what I'm going to do with that book because it needs to be developed a lot. And I wanted to, and it was a few years after I lost Boo Boo, and I wanted to capture all those stories. And I started making a list of, and after a while, I had a pretty long list. Like, well, each of these could be a chapter, and it was my really first attempt at serious creative writing, I think. And I learned how difficult it is doing creative writing, but I took it seriously, and it didn't turn into a long book. It's a fairly short book. It's I think a total about 50,000 words, but it's one of those things where I wanted, even to the day, I still haven't accomplished this. My accomplishment would be to read these stories to other people's, because I'd love to see an audience reaction to these stories, to see, because I enjoyed them. I enjoyed writing the stories. I enjoyed the events when they happened, and that's where I wanted to get the stories to that point where I could, stand in front of an audience, read the story, and hopefully get a good reaction from them. I'm still, hopefully someday I'll get that opportunity to read those stories.
You'll just have to contact your local Barnes and Noble. They'll have you in.
Oh, I tried everything. I'll try again. I'm a guy. Both books. Well, I think I looked at this the other day. Farm Pond is ranked about 2,500,000 in Amazon, and Echoes in the Stars is ranked about 3,500,000. So I'm not the guy Barnes and Noble's looking for, but
You'd be surprised. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm talking to you today. Maybe you can help spread the word that I'm looking for people to buy my book and enjoy it. I mean, I hope they enjoy it. I got like you said, I got an award for Echoes, and it got good reviews. Got a lot of good reviews, and I was happy with that. So I think the book stands on its own. I think it's a passable book. I think it's a marketable book, but it's getting people interested in it, and buying it. And like I said, invite me. I'm losing my voice, but I'll do my best to read the story to any audience that's willing out there.
Well, fun. Yeah, because it really sounds like it would appeal to animal lovers, but especially dog lovers. I have a golden retriever sitting right
there. You do. Yeah. Oh, well, both books are written for dog lovers, I think. That's why I put dogs, as the main characters in Farm Pond, because they're such heroic characters at times. The way they're fearless. They're fearless animals, and that's what I admire so much about them. And they're loving, fearless characters, and they're crazy, and they do stupid things, and they do all the stuff that just makes great writing material. So
if I wrote about my dog, I would just write about him pretty much eating most of the things in my house. So.
What's that book? I think it's called Trixie by Dean Koontz. Are you familiar with that book?
I mean, I'm familiar with Dean Koontz. I don't think I've read that book particularly.
Yeah, it's the one book he's written that isn't creepy. It's a true story about his dog, Trixie.
I will have to look that one up. That sounds like a lot of fun.
He's a big dog person, it turns out. And after Trixie, he's become a big dog rescue person.
Oh, interesting.
And the other neat thing about that book is it kind of gives you insight into Dean Koontz at the same time. It's a little tiny autobiography, but it's about a dog, about his dog Trixie that was a rescue dog. And yeah, I read that. It's like, yeah, that's what I wanted Echoes of the Stars to be. That same kind of book.
Right.
Well, I'm not famous. I think it follows the same.
But when you are, everyone is going to like, oh, we get it now. This is Boo Boo from Farm Pond.
Yeah, Rascal. There she is. No, she's shy. She doesn't like it when I work at my computer.
Well, my dog has this, and that's a visiting dog, but my dog has this eerie thing. Like he knows when I'm done. Like I must say certain words every time when I'm done, because then he comes up and wags his tail and he's like, pet me, pet me. So, so tell me about Events of Fate.
See, that's the one book that's really not available right now. That was my first book.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm still wrestling. Yeah, I know it's out there. I think it's, I don't know if it's on Amazon. I know it's on Goodreads. I've kind of taken it out of production or availability right now. My sister mentioned that the other day, that I need to build on that book. Right now it's barely a novella, and it's just barely starting a story. It's a science fiction story. It's
fun.
About the future, when the world's been destroyed and humanity's trying to come back to life again. And it's it's there. I just that's my first attempt at writing, but it needs work. It needs a lot of work.
We all have those. Do you think you'll make another book following Farm Pond with those same characters, or was that pretty much all wrapped up?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Not to give too much away.
Well, because it was I think I concluded it as well as possible, for what I was shooting for, in honor of my friend Athena, to create a book. It just encapsulated that part of my life, and but yeah, I think I got all these characters now. And at the end of the book, as you would hope, everything's happy again, but anything else can happen. I mean, who knows?
They can get sucked back into the in-between again, right?
Who knows? What could happen with all these characters, and if the Earthlings are willing to be stuck on another planet somewhere, I don't know. But I don't know if I'd bring the Earthlings back into it. I might just, if I did do it, I'd probably just use other worlds, and in between lands a great place to start, because all the characters are already there. There's some, yeah. Who knows? And fantasy, I never thought I'd write fantasy. I have another book in mind, which is basically just another kind of book of short stories about adventures, my own adventures that I've had, my own silly adventures, nothing serious, but just stuff I've written over the years, that I might put into a book. That's there. I'm also thinking about writing another nonfiction book. And this would be a huge project. This would be years away. But after writing Echoes in the Stars, I became fascinated about Eastern Colorado, because it's no man's land. No one knows about Eastern Colorado. And maybe I could come up with a good fiction book about Eastern Colorado, or maybe a nonfiction book about Eastern Colorado. But there's people that live out there, but we don't know who they are.
It's very desolate. I've driven across there once and told my husband I would never do it again. So, not to diss Eastern Colorado, but it is very sparse. And I was driving across the country from Philadelphia to Colorado when we moved here, and my cell phone lost the tower and I had no way to contact anyone. And I thought, where is my husband moving me? So
yeah. I've done a lot of driving around there, but not deep in. I mean, it's vast. It's almost another state to itself out there. And Echoes in the Stars is what got me into that, because I started studying the geography of Colorado and started, and most of our adventures took place in the Front Range, the mountain. So I learned, just getting the dogs out and exploring places required exploring places in the Front Range I'd never been to before. And that's what got me thinking, well, geez, there's even more stuff further east what's out there. There's not much public land, unfortunately, but there's definitely something out there that is mysterious. And that might be a good book. I don't know if it would be or not, but it's definitely a land of mystery out there.
Well, we will look forward to anything else you write next. Let all of our listeners know where we can find you and your books.
Okay, yeah, Amazon is the obvious place. I got the hardcover, paperback, and ebook on Amazon. I have a Goodreads page if just curious. I don't do much with that.
I found you there, so you're there.
I'm there. And actually, I got my web page for my own imprint, TFL Stories.
Okay.
Not much going on there either. I'm selling my book on that page. I'm a little low on books right now because I've just been giving them all away. I ordered a few, and I think I've given them all away at this point. But hopefully I'll have more books. I got Echoes. I got more copies of Echoes on the Star that are still available. There's still, first copy, first printing, first edition. Those are still available for anyone who's curious in Echoes in the Stars. And I need to do more with that. I need to write some more blogs and stuff. I got to the point where I didn't think anyone was paying any attention to it, but I think it's a pretty little web page, and
it's a good web page. I found your hardcovers there, and those are always good gift ideas. So, especially for dog lovers, I think you should hype that up, maybe for Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And TFL comes from an old tagline of mine. It means thanks for listening.
Oh, that's a great tagline.
Anyone who reads or responds to me, making that connection is probably the most important thing to me. Is making that connection with people, and that's always a thrill.
And it seems like the books have helped you keep your connections to your dog as well as your friends.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's a wonderful way to honor that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, Gordon Frisbie. Spell your last name so I don't get it wrong.
Frisbie.
Frisbie, Gordon Frisbie. Thank you so much, and I hope you'll come back when you release your next book.
Thank you, Tricia. It was great.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.